I'm out in the afternoon here and it's sunny, and this soy field beside me has gotten really ripe, ready for the combine here in another few days. Over the last week, our video last week, it was quite green, like these trees up here. I'm throwing together a little talk to you about plurality. There's a question that's been kind of nagging me, and I'm not even sure what the hell I'm doing half the time, but I'm bumping out a bunch of stuff on YouTube. And you know, the idea is like, am I going to be a YouTuber? Am I like really into this as far as like doing a ton of research and trying to represent you know, someone in the plural community? And I think really the answer is like not quite. I'm really into discussing my plurality, among other things. Like my journey is I would say it dovetails with a bunch of stuff I've done. This is, you could say, maybe promotion for my book that I've got coming out soon. And it's, you know, the whole me culture is a big question mark. There's a picture of, you know, getting attention. Like, am I seeking attention? Am I attention seeking? And there's a struggle with this, because for my alters who've been dormant for so long, or very like low activity, you know, they've been hiding for 40 or 50 years. They come out every once in a while, very, very slightly. And now it's like, hey, they're all out here and doing stuff and really like mixing stuff up. And it's an adjustment. Like I find they are wanting attention. They do insert into my world, and it's great. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think there's a tendency to go overboard with it at times, and certainly like I don't fault them for it. I look at it and I go, well, if I was hiding for 50 years and then all of a sudden somebody kind of lifted the veil and I'm looking around going, okay, like I'm a part of this all. I haven't just been sitting back kind of imagining it or participating in it from a distance and thinking that was normal. I'm actually more interactive with things. So I would be like all over it, right? Like, I mean, I think most of us would. I think we all would have that hunger to kind of like interact and mix it up and find ourselves more in the context of what we are in the world, rather than being tucked back inside someone who's kind of like running the show. So my talk on plurality with you all, I see it, you know, this isn't anything out of the literature as far as like what the DSM says. I can talk like that. I can have perspective, and I can certainly fit a lot of what's going on with me into a medical model. But I think that's really like low level, 10-20% stuff. Overall, I think I've gained the most traction in the IFS model. And the IFS model it parallels a lot of what I'm looking at in my book and what I've been sensing from patients and the others, as far as how they perceive that back influence. That, you know, here I am in my presentation, what I call, or what a lot of people call, this is something that's going around before I even got into like really looking at my plurality, what a lot of other people call your representative. So if you're in a customer service job, you're like, hey, right this way, would you like a table or a booth, or, you know, what can I get you guys from the bar to start off with? And you're in that customer service mode, right? You're in that sort of like, let me be your person, you know. And in nursing we do this a lot. We do this kind of like, let me project the professionalism and the clinical competence to your situation, and I'll be the nurse, or I'll be whatever role you need me to be. So we all do this. We all have that sort of representative persona, and we put it out there and put it out there and put it out there. And it's a valuable thing. It's a sort of an agreed upon working for interacting with everybody. Everybody's comfortable with it. They see it in certain parameters, and so it works. You know, like I have this respect for it at its function as a tool, as it's something that can interact with. It's almost like a computer language. You know, if you're running a Mac and you're trying to interface with a PC, you know, today there's all kinds of ways to link up, you know, like the Chrome application, and so many others will do both Macs and PCs, of course. So there's ways to interface, but I think we're just at the frontier in our sort of species awareness that we're running interfaces that aren't compatible, you know. Like we think they're compatible. We have this idea that they're compatible. And I kind of think of what I've been going through in the last year, like this whole, I'm Mark, and then I realize, no, I'm Ryder. I'm this guy that I've been talking about in my book that Patience has been writing like 70% of it. So that's really what's coming out. What's pressing forward is this Ryder persona, right? The adult, the responsible guy, whatever. I mean, I'm, you know, plenty irresponsible at times, because that's all the variability that happens in that back closet. but opening, like getting myself aware of my more authentic self and what's happening behind me and around me. I feel like around me is where most of my authentic self is, and what I've been presenting, what I've been moving forward with, has been that persona. And you know, I think even we could make a parallel here. I don't want to sound political, but if you had a look at the greater scheme of how culture and you know, the mind manipulation that's out there has been happening for everybody, what you have is a central intelligence artificiality that's presented to the world, and this is us, you know. We're all in your face, and we're making it all happen, and woo, you can't really concentrate on anything else. But then as that falls away a bit, and you look at what else is going on, like how many other sort of things are out there, who's coming up from different spots, and plenty of that is happening today, right? Like more than probably any other time in history, we're seeing the artificiality that's kind of held up in front of us. So it's kind of like the world, or our species, has this persona, and certain segments of the species, certain cultures, are trying to push a persona out to make it the dominant or the most projected, most accepted model. And really, like, we're everything, right? Like I can get into it and talk to you about non-duality at some point, but I really look at us as more or less, you know, we're if Patience were out right now, she would say something really brilliant, like she's written in the book. And I don't discuss the book much. I'm starting to with a few people, and that's new for me. Part of the reason it's taken me 8 years to write this thing and get it out is because I haven't known how to talk about it. Like I thought I wrote it. I thought, wow, that was really interesting. And then I realized, you know, just in the last year that 70% of it was written by an alter who was trying to tell me what's going on at a level that I'm not really understanding. Like basically I'm out there as the persona thinking I'm real, but really I'm artificial. I'm just kind of like so busy and so in your face that that's all you have a chance to focus on. But when we come back and we look at all the other sort of angles to things, there's this whole different layered understanding of what's back there. And so the way she wrote it, the way I'm beginning to understand it more and more, I'm more and more ready to talk about it. And I don't know that there's a real break point where it's like, once you get into it, if you do happen to pick it up, and I hope you do, you'll see that there's no real break point between a guy like me who's fairly bare bones talking about it and someone who's more esoteric with more philosophical language and eloquent ways of putting things like patience. I think the difference that we have a lot of the times in our society is that certain people talk a good game but don't really handle the sort of specifics or the practical side of things, and then other people maybe aren't so linguistically adept, and so they can't really get most of what they're thinking about or most of what they sense across very well, but they're very, very capable in those practical ways. So I'm kind of like finding I'm blending both of those elements. Like you're looking at the more practical, more sort of like regular speaking, feet on the ground kind of guy. Anyways, let me get to this this discussion a little bit about altars and how I've come to kind of like look at it a little bit. We're under this tree here, and these leaves, I would say, are the outgrowth. The mature tree has a this great big canopy up there, and it's happening on like a full scale. We've got an adult functioning tree, and at the leaves we're seeing all this photosynthesis. We're seeing all this process, right? The explosion off of this thing for oxygen, the way it's burgeoning and in its place, making things happen as a tree is right there. Now, when it was younger, and I'm going to use this little evergreen beside it here as a comparison. When it was younger, it had less canopy, more sort of susceptibility to wind and elements, had a lot more sort of primacy, right? Primacy to the earth, more rooted, more less dynamic, I guess, maybe is the way to look at it. Although if you say to yourself, going down into those roots, starting out as a seed, opening and growing is a very dynamic process, a very sort of explosive growth thing. So I look at my altars along the lines of trees, and I think in terms of the little ones, I'm not going to get into things with you much about the ridiculous side of things. He's another host that kind of runs things on a different platform. This is the writer, more sort of grounded, basic kind of elements and emotional stuff. So you look at this tree and you think, oh wow, it's really got it going on. All of this stuff is happening up here in the canopy, but down through the trunk and into the roots, where it sort of meets the ground, and what's happening down here has a substance this is where it's rooted to the earth. Here's where things, the obvious canopy, the obvious oxygen, carbon dioxide exchange, the big sway in the wind, all of this presentation is happening up here, but down in the roots, just like with the little tree, more grounded and closer to the earth is where things spring from and where things kind of go to hide. So the more we're down in the earth, the more we're underground, the more occult or the more hidden things are. And this is where I see the littles. I see the littles very rooted in intuition. They have a kind of emotional capacity that's very broad and a little wild at times, and it's difficult to get a handle on that. Like, it doesn't mean that, you know, you can't somewhat function with it, but it's a different kind of awareness. And one of the things that I've seen time and time again when I've read a lot of stuff on DID or OSDD is this idea that you're going to get your littles, give them language, grow them, and they will sort of integrate with the rest of you. They'll become like the canopy, and everybody will be this happy, big, dynamic tree after a while. And for me, what I've always sensed right from the beginning, and quite a bit in the book, from that holistic, you know, everything has a place and function where things are at perspective, is that the roots, if I can really focus on where I'm coming from and what's happening in the earth, like taking the sustenance, that sort of grounded feeling from the earth, from the mother, just being. My sense that what happens down here is way more static, doesn't have that kind of, you know, wildness and dynamic that the upper branches and the swaying boughs produce. It's more settled here, and just being is really where it's at. Like that rooted, solid earth, but hidden, less intellectual, you know, less busy. This is where I connect with my littles. This is what I do for looking at and respecting that groundedness, that whole, sheltered, solid, grounded feeling. And I love it. I mean, I'm not really someone who's gonna, like, at least as far as I can tell, I'm not someone who's gonna try to progress my littles on a path of growing up and understanding a bunch of stuff and giving them language and all of that. I've just kind of, if I was in my 30s and I had a family and a career and I'm just discovering my plurality and I'm all over the place with everything, and I'm like, wow, you know, I've got to get everything ship shape here and get everybody on the same level, and I've got to grow my littles into these sort of upper functioning branches of myself, and everything needs to sway together, and we have to have this, you know, alignment so that I can function in a career and so that I can function in a you know, in a relationship and everything to everybody else. I can see how traditionally, I think that's much of the time a lot of the way systems go. And I should say to you, whenever anybody generalizes about a DID system, throw that out, because everybody is different. You know, there's plenty of systems out there that keep their little small, that don't do like large exponential types of growth pictures with them. Some of them grow and some of them integrate at certain levels and do these different things. Everybody's different though. There's really no expertise as far as plurality goes. And if you think about it, it's not a static thing. Plurality is a variability model. It's an exercise in this whole big fluctuating dynamic among individuals, and you know, you mix all of this different stuff in where you've got, you know, hormonal influences, environmental influences, upbringing, culture. It's just endless. So the one thing I don't think I'm doing with my channel here, if you want to call it that, is trying to represent a segment of the plural world. I'm more or less just giving you my take on it, and my take is, you know, mostly where I'm at. I'll use instances from the plural world, and I'll cover sort of certain bases that are common thought, but for the most part, I'm trying to sort of look at myself as a somewhat, I don't want to say unique, but different package. I don't have this big push to get everything sorted out right away. I'm kind of looking at things and I'm saying, okay, I don't have the career, I don't have the family, I don't have to get everything stacked in a proper order quickly. So why don't I just play with this? And this is kind of what I've been doing. I've been honeymooning, getting to know my parts, my alters. If you sit in the plural world, especially at the level of people with full-blown DID where they've got a dozen or 20 alters, the idea to call them parts is a sort of a slap in the face. They've been so expanded and so blown apart from their development in childhood that they've actually had to make themselves, at the fingertips, had to make themselves into individual alters, into sort of functioning people apart from that core. And when you look at IFS, the internal family systems, they're talking about, well, everybody having parts, but a lot of them having to grow in a sort of a more standard way where they integrated as children. They weren't spread out with alters. So they're talking about the same thing by and large. It's all on a continuum. If you get into IFS, a lot of people will tell you that we're all multiple personalities. It's just that some of us have them compact and within us in a very subtle way, so that you're not necessarily talking like you're having different alters and stuff. And because as far as the writer system goes, we're more of a median system. We're kind of like in that in-between space between being more integrated and all the way over here at the DID side where things are really blown apart and there's dozens, sometimes hundreds of alters that are influencing things. So we have a smaller picture, more together, not quite integrated, but not quite scattered in a really disruptive way. And I think a lot of that was patience writing the book and making me aware of so many things in my plurality without me actually facing the idea that I was plural. I thought I was a chameleon personality with attachment problems. I had a kind of an overlying bipolar temperament. I should say that bipolar stuff, if you see my earlier video, I was kind of questioning how much my bipolar was influencing what's the delusional psychotic edge of this that could be happening where I think I've got these different personalities. And what I've been finding is the more I look at what's going on with the alters at different levels and meeting them where they're at and having that sort of connection enhanced, allowing them what's happening for them, giving them that validity and that reassurance, that acknowledgement. A lot of that delusional I guess the word probably would be flighty. I don't like the word unstable so much because I think there's very little stability out there depending on what you're doing, how you're tracking. So most of what you get for stability is from your sort of internal gyro or your modeling of how you handle yourself in the world. So but what IFS, what internal family systems is doing that I think is super interesting is they're couching a lot of typical psychiatric diagnoses in how your parts are responding. And what I'm finding very, very clearly is that my protector, my persecutor, kind of critical parts have this function of driving things in an uncomfortable way. And I've been managing that better and better over the last few months and finding that, once I get off my own back and once I figure out why they're doing it and how that's adaptive for them, but not for the entire being, I'm able to sort of like soften out a lot of that stuff and let go of some of the more dysfunctional patterns. So if you take the lens of plurality and apply it to a lot of what's out there as far as 20th century psychiatric and psychological thinking, I think what we're going to find here in the next few decades is IFS, the model of plurality, really is more that 21st century movement that's needed to shift us out of so much mechanized or responsive to pharmaceuticals type of thinking, where it's thought, you need to be fixed and really or medicated, and really what you need to be doing is just a little bit better organized, a little more broadly aware. And once you get that broad awareness and you can see what's happening back here more, even if it's not like full-blown alters that are coming out and doing things that you're not aware of, even if it's just parts of yourself, your subconscious, that have these kind of like strangleholds on certain parts of your emotions and certain ways you function or thrive with yourself. Once you get a little distance from that, you can see, hey, I can kind of shape this differently and I can move forward with a cleaner path. I really think IFS is going to be probably one of the only recognizable forms of therapy out there in the next few decades. I think a lot of this other stuff, the cognitive behavioral therapy stuff, that's so 1990s, let's function with our mind and work everything from that frontal lobe. The intellect is a great thing, and it's good to kind of like understand some of its parameters, but you also need to really understand its limitations. And when we're looking at trauma with the emotional, intuitive elements, you're really dealing with a whole different layer of shifting foundation. And on that shifting foundation, you can use all the intellect you want. It's not going to ground you. You know what I mean? You have to kind of like move through your layers, understand your position in things, look at what's disrupted your development over your lifetime. And using the IFS model for that really works quite well. So that's fairly, I don't know where we're at here, 27 minutes, holy shit. So, I've got to get off here, and I don't know if blasting out my perspectives is worthwhile for some of you. I think some of you, over time, if I'm doing this as a guy who's just working his way into his plurality, opening to it a little differently, and you're seeing that process, not as someone who's been, open for 5-10 years and has a really sort of like a padded, well-polished discussion for it. Me, I'm more, okay, this is where I'm at, this is how I'm figuring things out, these are the layers I'm dealing with right now, and this is how I'm moving forward. So I'm hoping that there's some value in this for some of you. You can be plural, like, high-end DID, maybe getting something from that median middle ground guy who's looking at things a little differently. And you can be more singlet, sort of individual-centered, and struggling with things in the pharmaceutical world, and start to look at IFS a little more. And I'm encouraging people to do that. A lot of my old friends from a lot of my old groups where we were looking at, decarcerating mental health, getting into sort of alternative viewpoints for mental health. This stuff, I think IFS is really sort of like going to be the driver, going to be the vehicle that opens a lot of doors for a lot of people here in the next few years. So I'll cut it here. Remember the tree. Remember, it's not all about the canopy and the photosynthesis and the swaying branches and all of that sort of structure and hierarchy up there, a lot of it is right down low in the roots, right down there at the ground where everything's held together and operating from at a very basic level. So I'm looking at myself as an organism that can function at different levels, thrive, not necessarily independently, but thrive in different functionality, in different ways. And I'm kind of looking at that biodiversity, or that variability. Variability is kind of like one of my favorite concepts. If you had to ask me what my favorite words were, it's a tie between kinda and sorta, you know. So I kind of like the whole idea that there's wiggle room. There's you know, you're never painted into a corner. You're never boxed in. You're never pigeonholed. You've got this sense of yourself, this underlying strength that is inherent when you can see yourself at different levels with different operating styles, instead of thinking yourself as one entity that's being constantly pushed forward, that representative that's, you know, held out in front of everybody, that's very busy and very kind of like active, but really is a compensation or a sort of a veil that's keeping a lot of what's really going on at your lower levels obscured. So coming up on 32 minutes here, guys. It's been great. I hope you're getting something out of my what is this? I hope you're getting something out of my journey. All right, and I'm here for you guys. I'm more and more here for myself. Like, I've never really gotten to the point in my life where I felt more centered. A lot of it's being off balance. So the more off balance you are, the more you have to find center. So without holding out that representative and making that artificial push on something that's kind of basically plastic, to come back from that and say, okay, you know, there's some validity there, and I don't want to call it plastic in the sense that it's totally artificial, but that's one component that we keep holding out to the world. And really, there's so much more going on behind all of us, and within and below and above all of us. So I'll cut it there. Love you guys.